Okay, starting now. So I am Roberto Suarez. I repeat it again. Thank you for joining us from all over the world. Welcome, colleagues. Welcome, all participants. Welcome, panelists. IOE, the International Organization of Employers, is the largest private sector network. We always say that we are more than 150 independent and representative employers and business organizations, representing the interests of more than 50 million companies in more than 140 countries. And our convening power has to do with policies, has to do with the capacity that we have to push for having the right policies, the right regulations, not just for business, but also for society. And I want to greet the many of our members connected today, as well as our partner companies. Before starting the event, let me thank those who will contribute to making this event a success and whose cooperation and engagement with IOE is of critical importance to move together the business and human rights agenda forward. I would like to say a special word of appreciation to our keynote speakers, and we have with us the ILO Director General, Mr. Gilbert Humgo. He was with me last week in Asia, in Singapore, and I know he's flying tomorrow or this afternoon to Washington. So the fact that he has engaged already says a lot about his commitment also with us, but also the UN High Commissioner on Human Rights, Mr. Volker Turk, who has just been appointed some weeks ago. And despite this early appointment, he has already been engaged with us already in the Business and Human Rights Forum, but now with the launching of this center. Again, this says a lot about his commitment also with the employers community and with us, with IOE especially. But equally, I want to convey a special thanks to Dr. Anna Luhrmann, who is a State Minister for Europe and Climate at the German Federal Foreign Office. She's joining us. Apparently, she's a little bit late because she has a deferral, a small delay in her flight, but she could be joining in some minutes. In any case, these three contributions means a lot for us. For IOE, collective action, and a sincere and constructive engagement of different stakeholders, including international organizations, is an absolute priority in the steps that we need to make. And even more for the project that we want to launch today. It's absolutely critical that we work closely with governments, with countries such as Germany, which are leading the business and human rights agenda. For this reason, I want again to thank you, Dr. Luhrmann, who will be joining, for the critical support also that they are providing us to transform this project into a reality, which we will believe will advance the respect, the protection of human rights worldwide with involvement of the employers community. As I said, this is today an important event for us. IOE has been working for a long time with the business and human rights agenda, but this center, the future IOE Center, is a clear signal sent by us, our employers organizations, our partner company, to show that the private sector is not shying away from its responsibility to respect human rights and to promote human rights. This project is the first of this kind because it comes from and is driven by the mainstream business organization. We represent most of the economic activity worldwide, but also because of the policy impact that it can have at national level, involving local, national business. And when we say local and national through their business organizations, is of essence, because it will impact all sizes of companies with a particular focus, support, and capacity building for small and medium companies worldwide, and in particular in the global south, in developing economies. Our commitment is serious, and we keep saying that, is genuine and is purpose-driven. We want to improve with others, not just alone, human rights and labor conditions on the ground. Business is and must continue to play its role as a positive, transformative power of change. 10 years ago, the UN Guiding Principles were unanimously endorsed. And IOE was, from the very beginning, involved not just in the discussion, but also in the agreement. I had last year a very significant Rogi, who passed away, sadly, but he was at the center of this initiative. We have always referred to this tool, to the UN Guiding Principles, as our precious instrument to push this agenda. We want our business organizations not just to support them, but also getting involved and getting actively going to implement them at national level. And that's why, to support this effort, IOE has embedded the recommendation of the UN Guiding Principles in its activity, but also including in the UNGP 10+ roadmap. We believe that advancing the effective implementation of the principles is the central component of this project that we are launching today. One of the key achievements provided by the guiding principles has been precisely to allow us to speak the same language. And believe me, that's not easy. Having the same language, the same communication is not always easy. More importantly, to build trust. And it's also, this trust is not always there with different stakeholders, and to break silos among the different stakeholders. We, on a constant and daily basis, we see how difficult it is also to work in a coherent and more coordinated manner. Advancing the human rights must be a joint effort by all. We have clear, distinctive roles and responsibilities according to the principles. Business need to respect and state need to protect. We call the human rights journey as a joint journey. The state might be in the driving seat, and business and all other relevant stakeholders must act as co-pilots. The guiding principles have been a game changer. We can see that. However, let me stress here once again that for many companies, it has not been something exactly new. They have been acting ahead on this area before the advent of the guiding principles. They did not wait for them, and the same is applicable today. Since 2011, companies' engagement is not limited to sell itself to respecting human rights, but also to promote them. Action and measures taken by many companies have gone beyond the sole respect of human rights. Many companies have gone the extra mile and promoted the human rights through projects addressed to children, to vulnerable groups, through their corporate policies to promote within their own operation, but beyond their operation in their supply chain, the respect of these rights to the most vulnerable, including also to promote women's empowerment. Similarly, our employees' organizations worldwide had set up human rights working groups, produced important guidance, pushing this agenda and organized workshops and training to support their members' companies to implement the principles in different regions. But we agree, and that's why we are here, that we need to be serious in our engagement. It has not always been the case, and more can be done and should be done by all actors. Today, companies of all sides are facing important challenges due to the uncertain situation that the world is experiencing. Lack of finance, weak institutions, corruption, huge informality, energy crisis, inflation, but also bad policies and regulations. And these companies, despite all this scenario, are at the same time trying to meet the various new expectations on human rights. These efforts must be acknowledged and encouraged, especially the micro, small, and medium-sized enterprise, and those with operation and with business partners in countries with complex social challenges. The new requirements, some of them mandatory requirements, carry challenges, but also legitimate concerns that we have to raise. At the same time, they also carry important opportunities that we need to take advantage of. In this context, the IOE Center that we are launching will spearhead this effort, going from global to regional, through our employers' organizations. Our companies with these organizations will receive support from their national employers' organizations that will help them to improve the preventive approach and to manage human rights risks in supply chains, in value chains. Through practical tools, information and existing regulations, practical examples, concrete guidance, we want to raise awareness, but also support our members to be in the leading seat. We will want them to lead the policy and regulatory debate on this area, engaging different stakeholders. Dear participants, dear panelists, the UN Guiding Principles show us the way. The IOE centers will bring the synergies together with other stakeholders. The support from you, the support also for your governments is very important. And I want to mention especially the support from countries like Germany, which will be very instrumental to be together in the leading force. Thank you very much for listening to me. And I would like now to pass to an intervention from the Director General of ILO.
Ladies and gentlemen, first, let me thank the IOE and the German Foreign Office for inviting me to this important occasion. The creation of an IOE Center on Human Rights and Responsible Business Conduct is a significant and timely development. When I became Director General of the International Labour Organization, I made a clear commitment to protect and advance social justice. Responsible, sustainable enterprises have an essential role to play in this work. Therefore, it is crucial that enterprises align their policies and practices with the key relevant international instruments. These include the ILO Tripartite Declaration of Principles concerning multinational enterprises and social policy. Also, the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights. The IOE has been a strong supporter of both of these instruments, and this new IOE Center will allow more than 150 employer and business membership organizations and partner companies to get a better understanding of these international standards. It will enable them to see how to integrate respect for human rights into their business activities and how to become catalysts for responsible business conduct agenda at national level. The new IOE Center will also be able to help enterprises who want guidance and support in carrying out effectively the due diligence related to human rights. Such support will be very valuable because increasingly, governments require enterprises to integrate due diligence on human rights into their operations. And more, enterprises need to demonstrate respect for human rights right along their supply chains. The IOE and the ILO already work together in this area to develop and promote services and tools to help enterprises. An example of this is the practical tools that are part of the building blocks on decent work in supply chains that were agreed last summer. We are also working together on development cooperation projects that aim to strengthen responsible business conduct by employers' organizations. The new IOE Center will complement and accelerate this work. It should also promote the contribution that business makes to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Dear colleagues, I look forward to a continued strong partnership between the ILO and the IOE. Together, we can make great progress in promoting a responsible business conduct agenda. Thank you so much.
I think this message has been very clear from Gilbert, and also says a lot about the engagement of ILO also with the center. Let's pass now to the words of the High Commissioner for Human Rights.
Friends, colleagues, amidst global turmoil and the existential threat of climate change, amidst conflict, the lingering effects of the COVID pandemic and skyrocketing inequalities, amidst growing disinformation, breaches in trust and political disenchantment, we still have reasons to be encouraged. There are glimmers of hope, because many, including in the business community, are aware that change is needed. We must come together to confront these complex and interconnected challenges, and we must treat human rights as problem-solving tools to forge a path for a better future. The United Nations is counting on business to play their part. Our common agenda sets out an ambitious pathway for more networked, inclusive, and effective multilateralism, with a specific call for new business models to support the energy transition, sustainable finance, and the delivery of other global public goods. The call to action on human rights also encouraged the United Nations to partner with business on climate, tech, and sustainable development. This raises the bar for the role of business in ensuring that action to address our most pressing global challenges are anchored in human rights. Yet, as we all know very well, it is one thing to set out expectations and principles, it is another to meet and implement them. More is needed fully to realize the potential of the United Nations guiding principles on business and human rights, especially in this second decade of their existence. The initiative to create an IOE Center on Human Rights and Responsible Business Conduct is therefore timely and very welcome. It helps us to empower associations of employers to integrate human rights in their activities, to bolster their capacity to trigger action at the national level in line with the guiding principles, so that they can provide information and support to companies, so that companies in turn manage human rights risks, including along their value chain, and reduce the negative impact of business operations on human rights. I particularly welcome the Center's intended focus on micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, which in most countries form the backbone of local economies. Embedding international human rights standards and responsible business conduct into their operations can help achieve the scale and quality of change needed on the ground. For this reason, they are a constituency my office has sought to support. I congratulate the International Organization for Employers on this important initiative and look forward to deepening our cooperation.
Again, very clear message from the High Commissioner. I know that he is also busy traveling, but we have with us also a person, and I already announced it before, that was traveling and now has already arrived, and I want to thank her again. And Luc Roman, I hope that I pronounced well your name, State Secretary for Europe and Climate Change, very much willing to have a conversation with you. I would like to raise you two questions, but I will go one by one if you agree with that, okay? The first one has to do with the gaps that we need to fill. I mean, the High Commissioner referred to the implementation part, okay? And one thing is engaging, one thing is committing, and another thing also to be there also on the implementation side. How this center that we are launching can help also to fill many of the gaps from your perspective. And we know that Germany has been also very much taking a leading role on the business and human rights debate. So thank you again for joining. And the first question is now there.
Right. Yeah, thank you, first of all, for having me here, and thank you also for giving me the opportunity to address this audience. I also really highly would like to welcome that the International Organization of Employers is striving towards thorough human rights due diligence, because it's so critical, and here's how we move also from the talk to the action. to really build up an international help desk for long-term engagement that really shows also ownership and leadership from your organization. It's a strong sign of businesses' willingness to support the implementation of international due diligence standards on a global level. As you know, Germany adopted already in 2016 a national action plan on businesses and human rights as an implementation instrument for the UN guiding principles. We went a bit further 5 years later in June 2021 with a mandatory due diligence act with the German Supply Chain Due Diligence Act, which will enter into force just at the beginning of next year. So now, and we are also supporting now EU standards. So we're really moving to action, and indeed, we are anticipating the German enterprises' needs for guidance in the implementation of all of this, and also of the UN guiding principles. And that's why we've funded a national help desk in order to, right after actually the establishment of our national action plan. And the task is to give advice to companies, to offer capacity building and trainings and seminars, and to provide for online information. And these the interest in these services has more than doubled, of course, since the adaptation of the German Due Diligence Act. But we're also observing increased interest from supply countries, from both companies as well as chambers of commerce and business associations. And we give concrete advice on the upcoming rules. So what kind of cooperative behavior will Germany expect from suppliers around the world? That's the key question. And I'm certain that this interest will grow further with the EU Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive coming up. And I think this will really be a global game changer. It will underline the power of the European markets in shaping international standards. And due to the huge European market, any internationally operating company will have to comply with its provisions. So I expect no less than a global change in the perspective on doing business. In the near future, not only the quality of the product will count, but also the production process. And this is exactly why we decided to support IOE's initiative to develop a concept for an international center of excellence on responsible business conduct and business and human rights. We're funding a study with 90,000 euros that maps the needs for advice. And this study will analyze particularly the appropriate structure for an institutional resource that could help enterprises worldwide with a focus on small and medium enterprises. And I think this is really important, and particularly with the EU due diligence directive coming up, we will all need this kind of advice.
Well, it's very clear for us, and again, thank you for the support. Also, you can already be aware that many of our business organizations have many uncertainty. Let's put it like that, on how to deal with such a matter as supply chain due diligence, even though we have been also working a lot. And the fact that we also launched the center also with your support, also we hope that it will help also to provide more clarity and to engage further on this dynamic of due diligence. The second question then has to do with the future again, but more on your perspective as a government for the next 10 years. You know, what's your priority? Because you have been leading, you know, we employers and business organizations, we have the two sides. Sometimes we have to say, listen, we would like to have much more realism in the agenda, and I would like that to share with you, because it's not easy. Sometimes regulations are very, especially in countries where you have weak institutions, where you have, you know, issues like corruption, or when you have huge informality. You know? So how we can move together, bearing in mind your priorities for the coming 10 years, and how we can, because also you are State Secretary for Europe, and Europe has a big leading role also right. on all these matters. So if we can have also a conversation on that, that would be fantastic.
Sure. Yeah. No. Indeed. I mean, as you said yourself, I think the EU dimension will really keep us busy in the near future. Also, once we have an adaptation at the EU level, this will have to be translated to national law, right? This is how it works at the EU level. And also, I mean, if we look back in the last years, we have been focusing a lot on the responsibilities of companies themselves, so that the second pillar of the UNGP And now I think we will put more the coherence of sustainability policy in the center of the national action plan also, with a stronger focus on support for companies actually in implementing due diligence. So this is, I think, one thing that will happen. Then the second thing is, of course, we have to think more about what digitalization actually means for due diligence. We know it brings a whole set of opportunities, but also threats to the private sphere, in the case of misuse of surveillance technology, for instance, to parts of the population due to biased algorithms, society's cohesion. So this is really an issue, I think, that also has a dimension here for sort of the business and human rights agenda. That's one, but then also at the same time, sort of the unfortunately classical issues will not disappear, such as forced labor, child labor, because both actually increased during the pandemic, as we learned. So, and threats to the environment, of course. So here, in particularly, we are very concerned by violence against human rights defenders that are also sometimes threatened in the context of financial interests involved. This is really important to find answers here. And then finally, of course, we are strong supporters of the UN Global Compact, and we even want to strengthen our cooperation here, and also are very much committed to the ongoing reform process here.
Thank you very much, Anna. I think that's I take many things that you have said. One of the elements is also support for companies, especially for small and medium companies. Yep. I think that's going to be very, very much appreciated. And again, I want to thank you also for the support that the German government is giving us. Also, I think that we really believe that we can make things change, and we really believe that having our organization in a leading role, responsible leading role, I would say, that also make also a difference. So having also you with us, that's also important. Thank you very much for your time. We invite you to stay here with us the time that you can, but we appreciate also that you having such a busy agenda, also been traveling with some deferrals in your flights, and you're also joining us. I would like now to
thank you.
As to you, to give over to Matthias, my deputy, also very much at the head also of our business and human rights engagement, but also to Dante Pesce. Both of them are going to present the center, but Matthias also is going to be also the leading voice until the end of this event. I will also join, but listening and listen to all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Roberto, and greetings to all of you from very sunny but very cold Geneva. Two things before we start explaining with what the center is all about. We have interpretation if you haven't seen it so far. So if you want to have it in Spanish, French, or English, you just click on the globe at the bottom. And the second point is we want to really try to make this interactive. So if you have any question or comments, please use the Q&A or the chat function. I will have a look on both of it, and I will make sure that your questions will be answered during this webinar. Now, we are really proud that Dante Pesce joined us for the, to develop the Center for Center on Excellence on Responsible Business Conduct. Dante Pesce is well known to practically everyone. He was the chair of the UN Working Group on Business and Human Rights. He was a long-time member of it. And before he became a member of the UN Working Group, he was very much engaged in a lot of processes, multi-stakeholder processes at the international level, as for instance, ISO 26000, and I know Dante from that time. I also would say that Dante had the support of Jonas Burkheim, and I really would like also to thank Jonas for his great work contributing for the Center of Excellence on Responsible Business Conduct. So now Dante will explain a bit, what it is all about and what has been actually the outcome of all the consultations he had over the last weeks and months with also some of you actually who are online. Then you have a chance to ask any questions you would like to ask to Dante. And then we go a bit into the regions. We learn from our members what are the challenges in these regions and how the center can help in addressing these challenges. And then we go to companies, and then we go back to you. So that is what we have in front of us. Dante, tell us, what is the center all about?
Thank you, Matthias. Thank you, Roberto, and the other three speakers, let's say, including the state minister from Germany. It was a great pleasure to listen to you. Well, as Matthias already said, I have been involved in the process of implementing the guiding principles for many years. And my last task as member of the working group and chair of the working group was to lead the evaluation of the first 10 years of implementation of the guiding principles, and also develop the strategy for the next 10 years, the roadmap for the next 10 years. And I have to say that in that process, one of the key conclusions there were two sets of conclusions. One, it was around the governments and the need for governments to step up, the governments to lead by example, the governments to facilitate the creation of an enabling environment. And one cross-cutting conclusion of this process is that we need good or better governance, and we need rule of law. The best predictor for respect for human rights by anyone, including business, is the existence of rule of law. And that is a very important entry point, because it's not enough that business can do their part, can be incentivized or mandated to do X, Y, or Z, if the context, if the environment is not favorable for the respect for human rights. And companies don't live in isolation. They are part of an ecosystem. So that's one set of, let's say, conclusions. Of course, this is all in the public domain. But the second main conclusion that I would like to share is the role of mainstream business associations, IOE at the front. What we realize is that we need collective actions. We need to move from pioneers to mainstream. We need to normalize what is the work of pioneers. And therefore, there was very specific recommendations for industry associations to take a leading role. And that was described by Roberto Suarez very clearly when he stated that that IOE was embedding the recommendations made by the working group last year and turning them into a strategy for IOE to lead globally. That is extraordinary, because it's the first time ever that a global mainstream business association is committing to this level ever. And this is really history being made in front of us. Muy bien. So I would like to continue with some of the reflections that I had prepared. Also very important what Roberto Suarez stated, that our commitment is genuine and purpose-driven. And I want to remind us all that the purpose of all what we're doing, what is the purpose of all what we're doing, is to recognize and respect the human rights of the most vulnerable, the rights holders at the center. And we would like to suggest, Jonas and me, that we are teaming up in this work with IOE, for IOE, is to take the slogan of building back better on one to become a more concrete shaping what matters. Business is at the forefront of shaping international development. This is closely linked to the business responsibility incorporated in guiding principles. This holds true for all regions of the world. Shaping what matters from business perspective stands for living up to responsible business conduct and the respect for human rights, observing societal expectations for social and environmental sustainability, respecting laws and regulation regarding human rights due diligence. Building and shaping on this strong basis, business can contribute to a sustainable society, including its own economic sustainability. Let's say the business case inherent to the guiding principles. What is required for that? Awareness of general business and human rights requirements and expectations, getting ready for the rolling regulatory wave in a fast-changing environment, understanding of the regional and local specific needs and requirements. Business associations play a key role as they enjoy the trust of their members and reach a vast range of companies. They are also relevant actors for knowledge management. IOE has decided to promote responsible business conduct and Business and Human Rights in the creation of this Center on Human Rights and RBC to be complemented by regional hubs. A global consultation process was already conducted. And in fact, the study is ready, being reviewed right now by IOE team. But from our side, external advisors, that part of the work has been done. And out of this global consultation, some conclusions. There is great demand for this for business associations and companies, notably in the Global South. We did a consultation in different regions with business association, with the employers in Western Europe, North America, Latin America, Africa, and Asia. And there will be a conversation in a few days from now, specifically in China. We conducted interviews with key stakeholders from indigenous people, unions, civil society organizations, and other multilateral agencies like the ILO and the Office of the High Commissioner, and also the OECD through interviews. And we did a benchmarking on 12 different initiatives looking after inspiration. First of all, not to duplicate and avoid any kind of duplication, and capture lessons that can be useful, not to repeat mistakes, but also capture lessons that can be useful to maximize positive impact. And what we heard was, do not duplicate efforts, very clearly. Facilitate information that can be useful in business language, 1 or 2 pagers, almost ready for a PowerPoint. Don't pretend that all of us will be reading lengthy reports. That's realistically not going to happen. But also facilitate dialogue between South and North. And that dialogue between SMEs or larger companies exporting to larger companies buying. What we heard was that in the Global South, standards are being notified. Best practices or any kind of regulatory push is being pushed with no, let's say, with insufficient capacity being built at the other side of the chain. People realize that there are no new requirements when they are already there. And there is a sense that the developments that took place in Europe in terms of regulation was talking about or meant to talk about us. I'm from Chile, Global South, but without us. And that was said very clearly in different settings, including last week, Forum on Business and Human Rights, or two weeks ago. So, and one of the things that came out of these consultations is that in the exporters and Global South associations will like to have platforms to dialogue honestly in a bi-directional way. Right now, there is no real dialogue. It's called dialogue, but it's basically unilateral, north towards south. And that is something that is a lesson learned from this process, that people in the South want more voice. And what they flag is a few concerns. They say, we would like to think that this process that Europe is living and that is going to cascade into us will be an opportunity to enhance our competitiveness. Might be the case, hopefully is the case, but might also be the opposite, because the unintended negative consequences have not been unfolded fully, understood fully, and mitigated, or at least the mitigation mechanisms don't seem to be being put in place yet. So I would say that taking from what we heard is that in general, the response is positive. In general, people see that what we're living today is an opportunity, but at the same time, there is a flip side that needs to be further understood and work it. And we need all to work around them, not pretending that they don't exist, those unintended negative consequences, but quite the opposite, understanding that they do exist. And therefore, we need to work with them. We need to understand them in order to avoid and mitigate those potential negative effects. But overall, let me say that the attitude is very positive. That we didn't hear any voice saying this is the wrong agenda, this is going to a wrong place, this has nothing to do with business, this is nothing to do with the future, nothing like that. So all the reactions are positive. with some apprehensions. And of course, those are the things that we will have to deal with in the months and years to come. So particular attention should be accorded to underrepresented SMEs who do not have the capacity of large multinational enterprises to observe and implement the evolving requirements. Existing structures and initiatives, notably including those of international organizations and NGOs, are being observed in the setup of the center, the 12 benchmarks. The IOE Center will provide practical, easy-to-grasp BHR information and business conducive formats. It will also be a central knowledge management institution, which will serve as a business go-to. This is a crucial implementation step for the UNGP +10 agenda, calling for increased business coordination and activation. It shall become a trusted platform for South-North dialogue. The current design phase is culminating in this public IOE project presentation. We are aware that pushing the frontiers can be more appealing than normalizing established policies and legislation as they are the UNGPs today. We are here to raise the profile of normalization of existing provisions. Informed implementation needs to be the new sexy. You, governments, organizations, partners, and friends will be an important partner for the implementation process as of 2023 and towards 2030 and beyond. It is only in a concerted effort with responsible business as a key protagonist that current world challenges can be met and forward-looking shaping can take place. Evidence will allow us to evaluate the effectiveness of this effort. And as IOE General Secretary stated, business should become a positive, transformative power for change. Thank you very much again for your trust for Jonas and for me. And the floor is back to you, Matthias.
Thank you so much, Dante, and thank you for all the work you have done so far and you are doing. So basically, to put it in simple words, what we will do is we will support companies in their due diligence to provide concrete, detailed information, what are human rights risks in certain regions on the ground. So if a company wants to do due diligence and they say, I want to source from country A in the region V, what does it actually mean? What are the human rights risks there? And we will be able to provide this risk. Still, the company needs to do its due diligence, but it has a pretty good understanding what are the big topics there. We will then support the company in connecting them with the stakeholder on the ground. So the company will be able to understand, okay, I have to discuss and speak with these stakeholders about the risk. And these are already other initiatives which are active there, and I can partner with them. That is one part of the coin. The other part of the coin is that we will support the Employers Federation in that country to support their member companies. What does it actually mean, responsible business conduct? What is expected from me so I can continue to export to Europe, to North America, to other sources? What does it mean in terms of being able to pass all the social audits and to show to my buyers that I respect workers' rights and human rights? So there's one question in the chat from our members in Côte d'Ivoire, and thank you for that, Eduard. What is in it for Employers Federation in developing countries? What is in it is that we help Employers Federation and their member companies to understand what is expected and to be able to respond to these expectations so they can be part of the global market. Because in future, no company will be able to export to Europe if it cannot prove that it takes human rights and labor rights seriously. So that is basically the value proposition. We are there to support you, to guide you, and to go with you through the process. This is something we're doing already. Roberto spoke about it. But through the center, we will scale it up. We will create win-win-win situation. Win situation for the buying company, win situation for the supplier, and win situation actually for the community and the stakeholders on the ground. And we will bring in, of course, business, but we will bring in also other stakeholders to raise the legitimacy of this process. So I hope, Eduard, that answered to your question. There were one statement from Maria Malmberg with regards to the rights of spouses who are accompanying their spouse to another country, are relocated by companies. Fully take that on board, doesn't seem so much to be a question, but more a comment, but we understand that. So with that, we really want to hear from our members. What are their challenges at the moment and how we can support them? Please continue to use the chat and the question and answer. As you can see, we really will try to answer all of them. So with that, I directly would like to go over first to Renate Hornen-Graus. Renate Hornen-Graus is the IOE Vice President. She is also the Vice Chair of the ILO governing body, and we have heard already from Gilbert Umbo. She is a Managing Director of BDA, the German Employers Federation. She has many, many titles. I can't tell them all. Just to say, she has been involved on the issue about business and human rights for a long, long time. So Renate, what are the challenges in Germany or in Europe? And then how can we from the center support you and your members? Over to you, Renate.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Matthias. And I wish a good day to all of you, Roberto, and especially my long-standing friend, Dante Pesce. And also thank you to Jason for excellent preparation of this event. And I see there are many, many participants, which is very encouraging. First of all, it's a really important initiative, which I welcome very much. And so really thank you for taking on this work and for really getting concrete. And this is something the IOE really can add value for its member organizations and the companies it represents. Well, I should speak about Germany and more broadly about Europe. We do see companies in this region getting prepared and ready for all the different due diligence legislations. The Secretary of State, Anna Lührmann, she said that the German law will need to be applied from 1st of January onwards by the companies in Germany. And indeed, it's very, very hard. Companies have been strengthening and developing their due diligence activities in the last decade tremendously. Nevertheless, it still requires a lot to make sure that their engagement is in line with legislation, because the legislation is covering many more companies and going back to down even to very small sizes, even though if indirectly. But the challenges which companies are facing are, for instance, that they have a huge numbers of suppliers. They have a limited leverage to sufficiently engage with some suppliers, and especially when you move from tier 1 suppliers to tier 2, 3, or 4 suppliers. But even on tier 1, it depends on what kind of a supplier it is. Does he really depend on you or not? Do you have a market power or not? And in many cases, this is not existent. And so companies have a difficulty in enforcing things or asking suppliers to do something. We have also, in small companies, the limited capacity to address systemic risks deep down in the supply chain. Also, it's a matter of missing information. So as a consequence, and we do see the danger, and we already see it happening, and Dante mentioned it in his presentation, companies are shortening and narrowing their supply chains. They're cutting and leaving the most risky markets because, of course, the systemic risks, the political risks, are difficult to influence by one single company. And this cut and run approach has very negative consequences, especially for the affected workers and the communities. And it probably will not help the human rights in this region either. So we also see that there is guidance out and support structures to explain how due diligence works. But what is missing is a place where companies can get concrete information on specific risks in a certain region, where they can get information on concrete stakeholders to engage with and other companies and initiatives to partner with. And what is also missing is a robust capacity building throughout the supply chains. What we fear is that many companies in supply chains will be overwhelmed by the expectations and demands from business partners in Germany and Europe, and will not be able to engage in the global market. Again, the impact for workers and communities will be horrific. It is also very well established that exports promote economic growth, and that economic growth and working conditions are very closely related and intertwined. So we stand at the crossroads. Do we take an approach where due diligence becomes a pure compliance issue and where fewer and fewer companies will be able to engage in the global market, leading to a vicious circle of less trade, less growth, and worsening working conditions? Or do we take the high road by empowering companies in Germany and Europe to actively engage with their suppliers and empowering the suppliers to meet the demands and expectations from Europe with regard to responsible business conduct, so that they can be part of the global market? So in other words, we need to address the root causes in the supply chains. And here the center, which is being inaugurated today, can play a key role, because it can leverage the global network of the International Organization of Employers. The IOE has members in 150 countries. These organizations are important multipliers. They can build capacity and raise awareness among their membership deep down in supply chains. They are engaged in policy making, and thereby they contribute to more conducive environments for human rights. And they are, of course, also social partners negotiating working conditions with the trade unions. So through this global network, the IOE can also provide concrete information for the due diligence of companies. Finally, it is also laudable that with Dante, an absolute expert on the topic is leading the initiative. So Dante, once again, thank you very much, because you are an expert on the topic, but you also enjoy the trust of all stakeholders, from business as well as from non-business communities. So dear colleagues, with all this, I would really like to end by congratulating again the IOE for this initiative. BDA is highly supportive, and I wish you much success and many good initiatives which will come out of this in the different local contexts. So thank you very much, Matthias.
Thank you so much, Renate. That was great. And we have quite a lot of questions already here. Just to say, when it comes about human rights in Latin America, I'm very happy that Maria Camila Agudelo will speak in a second, but we have on the IOE website a lot of guidance material in all languages, Spanish, English, French. So please go to the IOE website and you will find under the business and human rights section a lot of guidance how to implement the UN guiding principles. There was a question whether we share more information about the center. Yes, we will do that, and we will send it to all of you, and Jason had put that already in the chat. There's a question about SMEs. Yes, SMEs will be a key focus of the center, and I'm very happy that afterwards Greg Chen will speak. Greg Chen is the voice of SMEs in Indonesia, so he can have a particular focus on that one. So with that, I really would like to go to Maria Camila Agudelo. She is the Public Affairs Director from Andes, our Colombian member. Andy is extremely active actually on this dossier. So we are very happy to have you here, Camila. Over to you. What are your challenges and how can we from the center help you to overcome them?
Thank you, Matthias, and thank you all. First, I would like to thank to the International Organization of Employers and the German Federal Foreign Office for the invitation to this panel. I'm gonna switch to Spanish, so if that's okay.
That's okay. So everyone goes on English on the, how you call it, on the little earth.
Interpretation.
Exactly. Over to you.
Bueno, quiero responder la pregunta de Matías, iniciando con algo que ocurrió en Colombia hace más o menos un mes, pero que bien podría estar ocurriendo en cualquiera de sus países. Muchos saben que desde hace unos meses en Colombia ganó las elecciones un gobierno de izquierda por primera vez en la historia, Y acá en Colombia hay una empresa francesa que opera desde hace varios años y trabaja en temas de servicio al cliente, BPO, bueno, etc. Es una gran generadora de empleo. Por ejemplo, acá en Colombia genera más de 42.000 empleos. Y hace un mes, el viceministro de Trabajo, que viene de ser un importante líder sindical, puso un tuit diciendo que iban a abrir una investigación a esta empresa francesa por sus prácticas laborales. Este solo tuit, donde decía que le iban a abrir esta investigación laboral, hizo caer la acción de esta empresa francesa en un 30% en la bolsa de París. O sea, este hecho que ocurrió en Colombia por un solo tuit hizo caer la acción de esta empresa en París en un 30%. ¿Por qué les quería decir esto? Porque frente a la pregunta de Matías, nosotros consideramos que la conducta empresarial responsable viene siendo uno de los temas primordiales en que se deben enfocar en este momento las empresas. Y nosotros como organizaciones de empleadores tenemos este llamado a recoger toda la normatividad, todos los principios y los estándares internacionales que pues ya les mencionaba Dante, les mencionaba Matías, y poderles dar unos lineamientos y una orientación a las empresas, especialmente las pequeñas y medianas empresas, que no tienen esta capacidad operativa que sí tienen las grandes empresas y frente a las cuales es un poco más difícil, digamos, llevar este tema a su operación. Entonces, es ahí donde el reto del nuevo Centro de Derechos Humanos y Conducta Empresarial Responsable de la OIE entra a jugar un papel muy importante, especialmente a nosotros, por ejemplo, en la región. Entonces, mi llamado es a que el centro pueda ayudarnos a nosotros, a las organizaciones empresariales, a darles estas guías a las empresas. Nosotros, por ejemplo, en la ANDI, por medio de varios proyectos de cooperación, hemos trabajado en enseñarles, digamos, a las empresas cuáles son los principios rectores de Naciones Unidas sobre empresas y derechos humanos, cuáles son las directrices de la OCDE para empresas multinacionales y toda su posterior guía de debida diligencia, cuál es la declaración sobre las empresas multinacionales de la OIT de la debida diligencia. Entonces, digamos que al hacer digamos, al mostrarles este camino, ellas se pueden comprometer y pueden empezar a implementar este proceso, así también como el plan de acción de empresas y derechos humanos que viene de los principios rectores. Quería contarles que en Colombia hemos tenido un reto particular y es que nosotros veníamos de un conflicto armado de más de 60 años, donde cuando hablábamos de derechos humanos, las empresas y en general pues la ciudadanía lo entendía como una violación de los derechos humanos en el marco del conflicto armado. Entonces, cuando nosotros empezamos a hablarles a las empresas de lo que eran derechos humanos y empresa, ellos lo conectaban con el conflicto armado y fue muy difícil empezar, digamos, ese diálogo y empezarles a mostrar de qué se trataba realmente empresas y derechos humanos. Ahora en Colombia ya las empresas están entendiendo de qué se trata, muchas de ellas operan en Europa, donde digamos hay unos altos estándares. Entonces lo que estamos haciendo es que estas empresas grandes que tienen operaciones en Europa puedan llevar esa información y puedan también llevar la importancia de este tema a empresas más pequeñas dentro de sus cadenas de suministro o sus cadenas de valor, y así poder hacer este tema mucho más atractivo y mostrarle la relevancia que tiene no solo en el país, sino en el mundo. Entonces yo quería agradecerles a la Organización Internacional de Empleadores por este centro que va a ser de gran ayuda, no solo para los países de la región de América Latina, sino para muchos otros que están, digamos, trabajando este tema, y también gracias por la invitación.
Thank you so much, Camilla. That was really great, in particular, also the reference to the sometimes very different national contexts than we have, for instance, in Europe, where this legislation is drafted, and also what does it mean for the understanding of human rights. We go to Greg Shen. Greg Shen is leading the exporter in Indonesia. So, Greg, you will be directly impacted by all this due diligence legislation, which is coming up in Europe at national level and across the world. So it would be really helpful to understand from you, what is the challenge of your member companies and how we as a center can help you? Over to you, Greg.
Thank you, Matthias. I think I will add to what Dante and Renata shared earlier. So basically, I think we hope what the IOE can also help, and I think with everyone here today in the audience, is to also consider that, especially in developing countries, we have a lot of MSMEs. So that's not only small, medium enterprises, but also micro companies and enterprises. And our informality is around 60 to 70% of our economy, meaning the companies and workers employed are in the informal sector. And that's been going on for decades, right? The needle has hardly moved. Now, two things that I think can really help us, and I think I will add again to what was shared earlier. One, on the access to market part. I know in Europe and many developed countries, you have basic minimum standards that exporters and supply chain providers who work with companies in developed countries have to adhere to. Now, one thing to consider is perhaps not necessarily requiring them to live up to the current standards, but there's a time lag, there's a lag period. Meaning what? I'll give you an illustration. So for emission standards, in Europe, I think the emission standards for Euro 4 vehicles was initiated in the 2005 to 2006 year. In Indonesia, we actually, it's just mandated by the government to have Euro 4 zone, Euro 4 cars, emission standard cars just in 2018. So that's basically a 12 to 13 years lag period, right? So if exporters, for example, from developing countries are allowed to still meet those same standards that we are all talking about, but not the current standards, but there's a lag period to recognize the capacity of our companies, our entrepreneurs, and of course our country, that would really help in terms of access to market. And nevertheless, those companies at developed countries can still help their counterparts in developing nations upgrade to eventually meet the current standards. But again, before that can happen, I think there should be a lag period, so they are not automatically cut off from the global supply chain. Secondly, recommendation as well, and this I've seen in action, and this is talking about access to technologies and equipments at prices that can be afforded by companies at developing countries. Now, I'll give you a simple illustration. 20 years ago, when we want to go to the movie theaters, you know how much one ticket costs. In Indonesia, a country like Indonesia, many moviegoers cannot afford a ticket price to go to the movie theater, enjoy THX surround sound, and so on and so forth. So piracy is very rampant, right? Illegal DVDs, CDs, so on and so forth. Now we fast forward to today. Many movie companies working together, obviously with the movie studios, they decided to charge tickets that are affordable. So for a ticket holder to watch a movie these days, the cheapest price can be like $2 US for one ticket, for example, or even $1.5, depending on like a matinee price. In the US, for example, a ticket price would be above $15 to $20. Now, when that happened, over time, many moviegoers switch from being informal, quote unquote, to becoming formal, meaning what? They stopped piracy, they stopped buying illegal DVDs and CDs, they became ashamed of it, right? Also through education, and they supported the practice of going to watch movies in the theaters, buying a ticket. So the transition actually, from that perspective, from informality to formality in terms of consumer behavior, was driven by companies' willingness to adjust their pricing to reflect the capacity of the country that they're in, primarily developing countries. So if I switch that illustration back to us as entrepreneurs, as micro, small, medium enterprises, we need access to technology. We need prices that we can access to that are affordable. If we are not able to do that, we will be in this vicious cycle, as I think Renata and Dante alluded to earlier, till who knows when, right? This will never end. But when I see myself in person, prices that are adjusted to reflect the market conditions and companies willing to sell the same exact product with the same exact specifications in a developing country for a much lower price than they would in a developed country, it really helps upgrade the population and the entrepreneurs there. One other example I can give on this point is hospitals. There are hospitals in some developing countries, including Indonesia, where I visited them, and they have different class of patients. They have VIP all the way down to third class. VIP, you have your own room. It's like a hotel suite. And for third class, you will share a bed with maybe 6 to 8 other patients in the same room. And your family might not be able to stay overnight with you. Now, the prices are very different, but the access to the same facilities, the same doctors, and the same medicine is there, right? So if you cannot afford certain medical care, okay, you go to third class, but you get access to the same top doctors, the same facilities, the same medicine at a reduced price. If you go to VIP, you get access to the same doctors, medicine, facilities, and treatment, but you just pay a premium for it. And when we inquire to the hospitals, they say, well, it's like cross-subsidy, right? The rich pay for the poor. They help pay for the poor, and that's how you can actually promote human rights in the context of companies in the private sector. So hopefully those two illustrations help give you an idea that these are what developing countries need, especially MSMEs. We need access to technology, we need access to equipment at an affordable price, and we need to be able to still access markets, knowing full well that today we're not ready to meet the current standards, but perhaps if we meet a standard that was used prior, so there's a time lag period, then that would make it a lot easier for us. Thank you, Matthias.
Thank you, Greg. And indeed, that is the whole purpose of the center, to help your member companies to meet the standards, so they can continue to be part of the global market and to export to Europe. Because the law is very clear, right? And if companies in Indonesia will not be able to show that they are respecting labor rights and human rights, it will be very challenging for them to export to the European Union. Now we move to Africa. I'm very happy to have with us Laila Slassi, from our member there from CGEM, the Employers Federation Morocco. First of all, congratulations for your team in the World Cup. You know, this World Cup has been extremely painful again for me as a German, being out in the first round, but you're doing very, very well. Congratulations. I would be happy to become Moroccan in this regard. So, Laila, what are the challenges in Morocco and how we can help you? Over to you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's a great pride here in Morocco to be at these finals, and yeah, this was completely unexpected, but a great example of what we can do together when we all believe. Thank you so much also for this invitation. It's a great honor for me here to represent the efforts made by my organization, the CGEM, in pushing more awareness among our organization and among the companies that belongs to our organization on human rights. We have a lot of challenges, as you can imagine, for an African country, but in general, I think human rights are a challenging issue to address, and a topic to address in the context of businesses and corporate. These challenges may differ from a company to another, and are very different depending on the size, the maturity, the governance. But generally speaking, when we ask our companies and those belonging to a CGEM, what are the main challenges they can identify in this context, most of them will talk about the prevention of discrimination and access to equal opportunities between male and female representation, of course, inclusion of people with disabilities and other vulnerable categories. We also hear a lot about issues, and we can see them, issues regarding child labor. This is pretty rare in the context of large organization, but this problem is definitely present in the sphere of influence of the companies, maybe in subcontractors and others. Also, the non-compliance with certain provision of our national legislation, the ignorance of OECD guidelines for multinational enterprises, and sometimes lack of consideration of aspects relating to social and environmental concerns. We at CGEM are definitely and actively promoting more human rights in our organization and within our companies. We are we put in place certain tools, but definitely the tool you are describing will help us strengthen and push for more awareness and more compliance with human rights. And also, especially, but our intention is to have it not only for enterprises and companies that exports to Europe, but more generally for all companies in the kingdom. We put in place in Morocco and through CGEM a label for corporate social responsibility. This label includes a huge and importance to respect of human rights, and we already put in place certain tools to allow companies audit themselves and their level of compliance with of course the national regulation, but that's for us the more basis and of the requirements to get access to this label. But they need to do more and to also check and be very cautious about their subcontractors and through the whole supply chain and in their ecosystem, and to act as an example. So far this label was granted to more than 100 companies that are renewing it one year after the other, and 30% of these 113 companies, to be precise, are SMEs. We are also, CGEM have been elected member of the governing body for ILO, the International Labour Office, and we since for the term 2021-2024, and trying there also to get access to best practices and transpose them in our local organization. We also put in place some measures to fight against gender discrimination, some professional equality awards that had a huge success here with the help of the Ministry of Labor and Professional Insertion in Morocco. But also some other initiatives like Morocco for Diversity. It was a platform to encourage companies to promote employability of women, and we put in place this action to have the company talk about their incentives and what they do internally in order to better and to inspire other companies. We also at CGEM tried to be, we conducted actually a survey to identify challenges, and that was with the help of 4 main organizations in this sector for more professional inclusion of people with disabilities, and some other initiatives. But definitely we don't want human rights to be a minor topic. For us, it's I
think we have a challenge with regards to net. Naila, can you hear me? Perhaps you switch off the camera. Okay. I think we heard a lot already from CGEM. They are extremely active. They have a lot of tools, and they have also a website to support the member companies on these tools. And we're looking very much forward to work very closely with CGEM. Before going on to the companies, and we don't have much time left, Dante, you want to come back for 2 minutes, actually, to respond to some of the issues which were raised. And there's also a question which you have seen from Zainab Quasi, which is about the financial services and the implication on due diligence when it comes to the financial service industry in developing countries. Perhaps you have also one word on this question. Over to you, Dante.
Yeah, thank you, Matthias. I would like to share with everyone a little bit of the time frame looking into the future, because we have been discussing many topics, and of course, in the assessment that we did, a lot of expectations came up. So, so I just want to say that during the next 6 months, we will move from a design phase to an inception phase, which means that we're going to define governance, we're going to define priorities, products, and services. We are going to clarify that there will be no miracles, and we will try to be, let's say, as practical as possible to go in an incremental approach. So it's just to manage and calm down expectations, because we still don't know exactly how every product and service will look like. And that inception phase will be part of a 3-year period of time that we're calling pilot phase. Because this is an initiative that is for the long run, we don't want to overrun ourselves, to go extremely too fast and then having to go back, but going step by step on solid basis to develop the products and services in the most user-friendly possible. So it's just to tell everyone, let's say, maintain the enthusiasm, reach out to us, maintain the contact, but also understand that we will go phase by phase, keeping all of you informed. The number one stakeholder here is the membership of IOE. So that's the first layer of importance, and we will absolutely keep you informed, but also please keep us informed with ideas, expectations, in order to be able to manage them in the most efficient and timely way. That was I wanted to add, Matthias. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dante. And perhaps, Jason, if you put your email address in the chat, and Dante, you put your IOE email in the chat, so everyone actually can reach out afterwards. That would be, I think, very important. So Jason and Dante, please put your email addresses in the chat, so everyone who does not have it can reach out to us. So we spoke about, first we had the political level, then we had the employer federations level, and now we go to the company level. We have the one big multinational, Randstad, which is for a long time a partner company of the IOE, and we have an SME, Arte. So we will hear both from a M&E and an SME, what are the challenge and how we can support you in overcome this challenge. Gustav, from Randstad, you are the, how do you say, Global Public Affairs lead, and I'm very happy to have you with us. Please give us a quick introduction about how we can support you. Over to you.
Thank you, Matthias, and thank you to all of the previous speakers so far on some of the great energy that I think I've been hearing and feeling also in the chat, as well as some of the key messages I've been reading. And thank you to the IOE for organizing this fantastic initiative. My name is Gustav van Oosterom. I represent Randstad in the Global Public Affairs team. And just to start off with, I think many of you may know Randstad, and Randstad is a purpose-driven company. So our mission is to support people and organizations in realizing their true potential. Then within our industry, within the HR services, we are the #1 HR services provider worldwide. Over 2021, had over 20 billion in revenue, over 270,000 permanent placements, internally average almost 40,000 internal employees, almost 5,000 outlets in 38 different countries, and we help employ over 650,000 people every single day, and internally have 50% of women in leadership positions. Now, regarding our strategy, I'd like to start at the very bottom, where we've basically taken our core values as our starting point to our business concept. One level above, looking at specifically our sustainability framework, which we split up into corporate citizenship, safeguarding labor and human rights, as well as taking environmental care. And we started to look at how each of these components also impacts the SDGs and SDG targets that are most close to our core business to help us achieve our ultimate goal, which is at the very top. By 2030, we want to touch the work lives of 500 million people worldwide. So that's how we basically integrated labor and human rights within our own concept. Now, regarding our business and human rights challenges, I think in our sector, it's important to note as an HR service provider that we are the supply chain in our industry. And the concept that you see here on the slide is basically goes to show that this is relevant for agency work within the portfolio of HR services. And we encounter 3 major challenges. First of all, how can we audit and monitor risks at our clients and make sure violations or potential violations are always reported? Because it's always on site at our clients where the talent is placed for work assignments. And this can be quite difficult considering we as Randstad are not constantly on site to monitor where our talent is working. Second issue, what can we do to create a situation of full transparency when we have over 500,000 workers working daily via Randstad? So how can we make sure that the situation of transparency increases over time? And the third point I'd like to make is perhaps a bit of a broader challenge. What can we do to basically increase the understanding? And I think Roberto Suarez mentioned this in the beginning, to increase the understanding and actions within our own internal organization, our own internal employees, but also the clients that we're working with, to make sure that we speak the same language. In our case, our consultants are our employees that are working in our business. So they are the closest ones to the candidates and the people working via Randstad at our clients. And we want to stress that we need to ensure that everybody at the table has the same understanding of human rights, and to also help recognize, mitigate, and remediate any human rights impacts or incidents in a decent way, if I may add. Now, lastly, this concept that was proposed on the Center of Excellence, I think could help in 3 ways, which I've tried to organize in 3 pillars here. On the left-hand side, I think it could help with a common understanding. Human rights due diligence as a process to do good for companies and industries based on the Ruggie framework, but also to help organizations understand which frameworks we're talking about when we refer to human rights, as well as to translate human rights due diligence as a process into practice for organizations. Now, the middle pillar, interactive tools. I think this was mentioned as well. What we would really hope to also be able to use is a sector-specific mapping and tools for organizations to use, and to share and learn from practical case studies with questions or dilemmas, perhaps, and to identify synergies across organizations, because nobody can do this as a one-off exercise by itself. And lastly, I would like to add on the right-hand side, we strongly believe that this concept could help in terms of impact by introducing an open and effective learning environment for partners and industry-specific improvements on salient issues, as well as potential future collaborations across industries and organizations for partnerships on perhaps specific topics. So that's what we would like to present for today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Gustav. And I think there's a lot of overlap what Employers Federation actually want like. So that is really not different, but it's very much actually complementing what many federations have expressed as their need in the consultations Dante and Jonas had. With that, let me go to the SME, to Niels van der Buyken. Niels, what is the need of you as an owner of an SME? Over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Matthias. Thank you very much for everybody to give my contribution also to this presentation event. I'm very happy so far what I heard. But as a mean, I would like first to give a short introduction about our company. We are a production company of kitchen tops. We produce stone kitchen tops in the Netherlands, and we work with around 100 people in the south of the Netherlands. We source mainly in Asia, especially granite comes from India, where we source the material. And due diligence for us is actually something what we find really important. But how do you do that as an SME? As mentioned before, we have some challenges, and for us the challenges in the beginning were as mentioned, we have no leverage. We are only an SME, and we buy with companies in India which are much bigger. And why will they invest in human rights? To be honest, sometimes there was a lack of awareness. The partners we cooperate with do not exactly know what due diligence is, what the human rights especially means, and also the OECD guidelines, what they mean. So we do not have the leverage, and for us it's very difficult to set a dialogue. We are a small company. We do not have the capacity sometimes in people who have the skills to do due diligence, so they do not have the knowledge. So we always search for partners to make sure that we can set up the dialogue, to ask the right questions, because that is something which is also difficult for SMEs like us. How can we ask the right questions, and how do we get the right answers, and how can we trust our partners that we get the right answers? Because as also mentioned before, we are not daily on site. We have to trust of the relations we have, and the answers we get from people and organizations. So therefore, I'm very happy with all I've heard so far, because as an SME, I am really looking forward to get help by setting up the dialogue, and also to get help by recognizing all the risks there are in our chain. For us as an SME, it started to get transparency, because we started this journey about 15 years ago, and the first step was to find out from where are our materials from. We're also now already joining to due diligence, but before you can do due diligence, you have to know where your materials are from. And as an SME, that's not so easy, to be honest. And all those kind of challenges we have as an SME, and I hope, and I'm surely convinced that with this new setup, we can get more answers, and we can cooperate with the IOE and many other organizations and companies to make sure that SMEs can get help about setting up a dialogue, to get help about the due diligence, and to set next step, because at the end, all the SMEs in the world are doing most of the business, that are not only the multinationals, that are especially SMEs who are doing the business, and also to make sure that the OECD guidelines are followed and the human rights are on a level which we all want to achieve. So for me, it's very important to tell us to even be aware. For an SME, it is very difficult to get, first of all, transparency, to make sure that there's no lack of awareness, and that you can, without some leverage, you can set up long-term partnerships to achieve the right goals. And that would be my contribution to this event. Thank you, Matthias.
Thank you so much, Niels, and it's very well taken. And for sure, count on us to support you in your due diligence, because, as you said, SMEs face particular challenges when it comes to, exercising leverage. The issue about traceability, of course, is an issue many companies have, right? And that is the first step, actually, to understand where are the materials coming from which I'm using, and then afterwards, then starting to understand what are the risks linked to them. We're coming to the end of this event. Thank you so much. There were two more questions I want to directly address in the chat. One was from Fernando, from our Mexican member, Concamin, about, companies cannot do it alone. You need proper legislation, and who is monitoring that? Well, I fully agree. You're running in open doors, Fernando. Just to say, part of the center will look at what are the risks at national level, and legislation, of course, plays a key role in that, right? Is the legislation in line with the international labor standards and in line with UN conventions on human rights? And are they properly enforced? So that is one part. And then, of course, and you know that best, being a member of the ILO governing body, we have a lot of supervisor machineries within the ILO and within the UN. And the IOE will continue to push for proper implementation and enforcement on the ground on this initiative. And then for us, the employers actually within the ILO, pushing for informality as a topic as the International Labor Standard, at the International Labor Conference, and how we can address informality. So be certain, Fernando, we will have a strong focus on that one. And then coming back to the question on sign up quasi about the financial services. Yes, of course, we will do both, right? It's not only about the traditional supply chain, we will also for sure focus on financial services and how we can support companies with regards to that, keeping in mind that countries coming from very different backgrounds, that companies are in very different backgrounds, and that we will address them, where they are. So from my side, I would like to thank all of you. I would like to thank particularly Jason Pegat, who is leading our human rights work. Pegat, can you Okay, sorry. Jason, can you switch on your camera? Jason is at the moment not in Geneva, but in Turin, because he is leading the employer's voice in a workshop of the Alliance 8.7. So thank you so much, Jason, for all of what you're doing there. Also, thank you to Monique Despierre, who is, as always, you know, the soul and the brain behind everything. She brought us here all together. Thank you, Monique, for all your work here. And also particularly thank you to Anita Wuku, who is the head of program and projects within the IOE. And she is basically the leading figure behind this whole project. Without her, nothing would have worked with this regard. So thank you, Anita, thank you, Jason, and thank you, Monique, for all your work. Merry Christmas to all of you. Looking forward to seeing you all, hopefully in January, when we have the next step in the center, and count on us. We are now going forward. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.